Hello, everyone. My name is Nandini Ray. I'm the Senior Manager of Maitri's Outreach, Prevention, and Policy Advocacy Program. On behalf of Maitri, I'm welcoming you all to this event. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking time from your busy schedule and joining us as we commemorate National Crime Victims' Rights Week. That is observed from April 23rd to April 29th by the US Department of Justice. This year, the theme of the week is Survivor Voices, Elevate, Engage, Effect Change. And the call to action is to amplify the voices of survivors and create environments where survivors have the confidence that they will be heard, believed, and supported. Let me share a PowerPoint slide deck with you so that you will know what I'm talking about. So I hope you can see the PowerPoint. So keeping this year's theme in mind, we are presenting our learnings on a topic that makes a difficult conversation for survivors and community members alike. Today, we will be sharing our findings with you about the perspective of South Asian community on marital rape and consent in intimate relationships. Before diving, into this today's discussion topic, let me share a little bit about Maitri for those who are joining us for the first time. Maitri is a free, confidential, nonprofit organization based in the San Francisco Bay Area that offers culturally responsive services primarily to South Asian immigrant families and individuals who are facing domestic violence and abuse. We don't discriminate in our services. Whoever calls us, we help them based on their needs. We have twofold mission, as you are seeing on the slide, that empowering South Asian survivors to lead lives of dignity and self-sufficiency, and enabling healthy relationships and gender equity through community education, engagement, and advocacy. Maitri's vision is to create a society where all relationships are built on dignity, equity, and compassion. On the slide, you can see all the programs we have. Let me talk about this. We have helpline program, peer counseling, transitional housing, housing stabilization, legal advocacy, economic empowerment, mental health support, volunteer engagement, outreach, prevention, and policy advocacy. I would request all of you to visit our website, that is www.maitri.org, to learn about our programs in detail and to know about Maitri's history and our present activities. In today's program, I will go over major findings of our listening sessions, and my colleague Jaya Suresh will facilitate a brief conversation with our invited guest. So first question I would like to talk about that, why did we focus on this topic? Because, one second. So I would like to know, are you seeing the slide? Okay. So why did we focus on the topic? Because we have to craft our prevention efforts that are based on our policy advocacy and community-based learning. So to that end, we decided to focus on the issue of marital rape and consent in intimate relationships. As we all know that rape is considered as a crime in all 50 states in the US, and including California, and whereas in all the South Asian countries, with the exception of Nepal, marital rape is not called out separately as a crime. And you know that most of our clients, the people we serve, they're coming from different South Asian countries, and we thought we need to know that what our community members are thinking about this issue, about the punishment, about the law about marital rape. And we began talking about this issue formally from 2021. And let's take a look at the timeline. So first, we started our conversation formally, like 2021 October. We did a podcast. We've invited Krista Colon, a policy advocacy specialist at the CPDV partnership. And 2022 in June, we invited Diane Gaut, Director of Impact Strategies at CPDV, at our volunteer meeting to discuss this topic. And 2022 October, we invited Mihir Desai, and he's a renowned human rights activist attorney about on marital rape law in India. And also in November 2022 to February 2023, we did a lot of research. We did multiple our staff meetings. We discussed a lot about this issue, and we developed a concept paper, and we finalized a couple of questions for our community members. In March 2023, we conducted a couple of listening sessions with our community members, including survivors and advocates. And we did some listening sessions with male and female attendees separately. March 2023, we collected community perspective via anonymous surveys. So our research and the discussions we had among us, so that led us to three major questions that we wanted to know from our community. And those are like community members' responses. We wanted to know community members' responses in criminalizing marital rape and prescribed punishment, what they're thinking about it, individual experiences learning about consent in intimate relationships, and individual suggestions. What kind of suggestion do they have on how to create awareness in the community? So we may find it little disappointing that we had so few responses from our community. But here I'd like to remind everyone that this is not an easy topic for many of us, even including advocates. Sex and sexuality is a taboo topic in our in our community, in many religious and cultural spaces in South Asian communities and countries, and we wanted to be respectful of those preferences. So we are really thankful to each participant, each person who shared their thoughts with us. We sent out our request to participate in our listening sessions and to take an anonymous survey to more than 10,000 people, 10,000 community members. But we had only 50 plus participants. You can see that on the slide. And I would like to, and most of them actually are Maitri affiliated advocates. I would also like to point out here that we saw a significantly less number of male community members participated. And only 8% of the total number of those, of our participants were male. And we conducted this study in English. So although most respondents support the accountability, so individual responses here to criminalizing marital rape and prescribed punishment, to these questions, we had a couple of responses we collected. couple of responses. I would like to share a couple of from those list. That is, when sex within marriage is forced and the agency and feelings of one partner is taken away or diminished, it is rape. Punishment has never reduced crime rate. Justice should be restorative. Someone said, I feel it would be hard to prove rape within marriage, and it could easily be deemed as a he said, she said situation. Someone said there may be room for second thoughts on how to punish the individual based on victim's request, as the outcomes may be further harmful for victims. Another response is the criminal justice system is not consistent in relation to race, economic status, etc. So when we ask that individual experience learning about consent in intimate relationships, these are the responses we got. We got many responses, but these are the one we would like to share with you. Like overwhelming majority of respondents never had formal education on sex or consent in intimate relationships. Most learned through friends, media outlets, and personal experiences. Sex education involved learning biology and menstruation cycle for girls. Most respondents have had conversation with their intimate partners about consent. So when we ask that individual experiences learning about consent in intimate relationships, we received these kind of responses like consent is an emotional factor. There is no yes or no. If the partner is lacking emotional content, then feelings of intimacy will not arise. Mere physical expression of intimacy can end up feeling violent or lacking consent. Someone said, in my opinion, a clear no is necessary to establish non-consent, whether it is communicated verbally or non-verbally. Another response is there should be a counselor system right before and after the marriage to talk about healthy relationships, what is acceptable and unacceptable norms, etc. So when we asked our community members that if they have any suggestion on how to create awareness in the community, we saw that most respondents suggested prevention at early age, early stages, school, college, and other educational institutions. Many responded suggested creating positive media campaigns and calling out harmful influences. Some mentioned about Bollywood, and many respondents suggested spaces for women to share their experiences and learning from each other. Also, some suggested that community and religious leaders discussing topics like marital rape and healthy relationship in open forums. So these are the suggestions we got from our community members on how to create awareness. And some individual suggestions we are sharing with you as they shared with us. Like someone said that men need to get involved in the discussion. It's important to acknowledge that discussing the illegality of this issue in 50 states may not be relevant to South Asian countries where it is not considered illegal. This could potentially be a sensitive point for those who disagree with the standards back home, leading to reluctance to discuss the issue openly. Someone said, redefine a marriage as a social contract where the parties will respect each other individually and freedom, that both partners are equal in status and that both will be loyal to each other. One respondent told us that there's too much intervention of legal into personal relationships. How does one cultivate responsibility and rights? So whatever we received, the comments from our community members, we shared that. And now our task ahead, what we are planning to do, that we heard from our community loud and clear that that there is a need for a space for open communication, to have this kind of difficult conversation, to build prevention strategies so that we can build right strategies to prevent domestic violence, abuse, including marital rape. And also, we have learned that there is a need to bridge the gap between immigrant experiences and the realities in the Bay Area, because we are in the Bay Area in here as an immigrant, and we we take their insights, and we will share with the policymakers. We share our learnings with policymakers and thought leaders, so laws are well informed and of every member of our community. So this is just a beginning. We need to do more of this conversation. We are planning to do a lot of dialogues with our community members, a lot of events we will be organizing, where we can have this kind of conversation, not only with community members as a group, but also one-on-one setting. And so as a call to action, while we take the learnings from the exercise to create newer ways to reach our community, we call on everyone right now who are presenting. We are present in this event. Also, who are not present today, but we would like to request all our community members that if you can join us, let us know if you can join us to change, to bring the change. You can take part in Maitri campaigns. We have so many educational community campaign, like our Engaging Men campaign. Please join us through this campaign. You can call us for presentation, discussion in your local school, educational center, your community. If you are part of any community-based organization, invite us so that we can talk about these issues, and together we can find out solution how to prevent domestic violence, abuse, including marital rape. And also, please follow us on our social media pages. Maitri Bay Area is the handle. We are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And visit our YouTube channel, where we have lots of discussion saved from our past. And we really want you to be with us. So thank you for staying with me. Now I am inviting Jaya Suresh, the Senior Manager of Maitri's Client Advocacy, Client Services program, to take over the stage, and she will bring two representatives from our second generation to know their thoughts on this topic. Thank you. Jaya, stage is yours.
Thank you, Nandini, and thank you to each and every one of you who has joined us here today. We have all heard from Nandini what were the findings of the work that we have been doing for the last couple of years on this very difficult and sensitive topic. Two of the things that really stood out for us was, as we went through the findings, was that it was very difficult to engage men in these conversations, right? Because and that's where we would like to focus as we are moving ahead. And the other thing is how to create a safe place where each and everyone will feel free, will have the freedom to talk about their thoughts without feeling very, because sex as a topic is very difficult for people from South Asia, especially for South Asian immigrants, right? Because of the way we have grown up and the way it has, and the cultural nuances that are part of our growing up. So we want to create open spaces where people will feel free, where they can talk about these things, so that we can bring to light what healthy relationship means and what violence in a sexual context also means. So these are some of the things we are trying to work on. And as we were going through this and doing our work, we realized that we were getting predominantly all the responses were from the first gen South Asian immigrants. And this kind of made us pause and wonder, what are the second gen South Asians thinking, immigrants here thinking about it, right? What are their viewpoints? Can we get some learnings from them? Can we talk to them and get their perspective? And to this end, we have invited two young South Asian folks to come and join us today so that we can have a conversation with them, understand what their perspectives may be, and see how we can fold it into our learnings with what we have already received from the first gen South Asian immigrants in this country. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the two folks who have agreed to join us today. I would first call upon Urja Patel. Urja Patel joined Maitri in January this year as our legal advocate. She brings with her passion to help marginalized communities, specifically relating to gender violence. And she also wants to help South Asian immigrants understand the legal system here and what are their rights within the legal system. Welcome, Urja. Next, I would like to introduce Sanjana Lakshmi. She's a second-year law student at UCLA. She has 4+ years of a paralegal experience working on a wide range of issues, including immigration, religious discrimination, and civil rights. With her passion for social justice, she hopes to build a career in public interest legal work. Welcome, Sanjana, to this conversation. Okay. Yeah. Having heard from Nandini the findings that we got through our efforts at listening through our listening sessions and through our anonymous surveys, I would first like to hear from both of you on the topic of marital rape and the prescribed punishment as it relates specifically to what is happening in California, right? What I would like to, my question is this a conversation that happens among your peers, right? Is marital rape even a topic that comes up, or is it not something that is of as much relevance to you as probably it is to the first gen South Asian immigrants here? Who would like to go first? Urja, I'm calling upon you.
So I think marital rape in general, we don't really discuss it as a topic of rape in terms of marriage, but when we discuss rape in an overall context, I think we do acknowledge that rape can happen in marriages and in intimate relationships. So I don't think we really specifically put marriage as like a side topic and we discuss rape within marriage, but we do acknowledge that rape does exist within marriages, within intimate relationships, and consent is really something that can be retracted at any given point. So I think in terms of our second generation, we are more informed on consent, and we do really understand that rape being in terms of rape, perpetrators, you know how that there's that myth that perpetrators are often strangers and individuals that we don't know. I think our generation really does acknowledge that a lot of rapists are individuals that we know, and so rape can happen in marriage and it can happen in intimate relationships.
Sanjana, what do you?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Urja just said. It's marital rape is not something that like I think me and my peers ever discuss as its own separate concept from rape itself. I think there's an understanding that rape is rape in any context, and that the marital status or partnership status of those involved does not make a difference in the actual rape and the lack of consent. I personally didn't even know until recently that it was treated or considered differently from other forms of, it's all rape, but like from other relationships in which rape happens. Yeah, like Urja said, I think that we understand that just because you're married to someone, just because you're in an intimate relationship with someone, that does not mean that that sex is automatically consented to. And I think that that's our understanding of consent, is that it can be retracted at any time, revoked at any time, and that is true for whatever type of relationship you have with the other person.
Thank you. One of the things that I remember, one of the responses that we had in a couple of responses we had during our listening sessions and on our surveys was where the responses were more towards the fact that if you're consenting to marriage, are you also consenting to having sex at whenever it is at all times, right? So that was a thing that had actually a couple of respondents brought up, right? So is that a factor? And that's something we haven't really delved deeper into. Maybe those are all things we need to delve deeper into. Now, moving on from marital rape, which is I think the reason why marital rape is being called out is because it's now like a part of the whole DV abuse, right? And when it is earlier, when it was not called out, probably it was not even considered that there was anything wrong, right? So now by calling it out, they are trying to probably give a broader definition to the whole thing of sexual violence within a marriage. So probably that's the reason why this has been called out separately. Now moving on to the second question that we had in our listening sessions and in our surveys was about consent in intimate relationship. And that is one area where I feel the second gen is much more progressive and more advanced and have more input on, right? So one of the major things that we learned through this exercise was many of us coming from the South Asian background, how we learned about physical intimacy was like, there was no formal education. And almost 100% of the responses, it was like there were maybe 1 or 2 persons who said, yes, they learned it, they had it as part of formal education, but almost 100% said no formal education, and everything was learned through primarily from movies, books, or friends, right? And that's where we also, like Nandini mentioned it in one of our findings, was like people really did call out Bollywood and the harmful effect it has had on our learning of or understanding of what physical intimacy is, and especially about consent, right? No means no was never something that we actually learned. Because most Bollywood movies, if you guys have also seen Bollywood movies, you would know, right? No never means no, right? No eventually ends up being yes, which gives people all sorts of ideas about consent, right? So if somebody says no, it doesn't mean no, because eventually she is going to say yes, is what is learned through those. So given that context, as a second gen South Asians, what is your, how did you guys learn about physical intimacy, and how much and when did you learn about consent? Sanjana, would you like to go first?
Sure. This is a bit of a difficult question, I think, for me to think about, because I feel like the ways that I learned about my learning about consent kind of happened gradually. Like, I don't remember any one instance in particular. And we have sex education in, I think, middle school here in the US, but that initial sex education was very biology and reproduction and menstruation focused. And I think we did talk about like safe sex practices, but I don't remember really consent being addressed very deeply in those initial conversations. I think I learned mostly about consent through media and conversations with friends and family. And in high school and college, we do, and currently in grad school, we have sexual assault trainings that all students have to participate in. But they don't tend to be very interactive. They're not something that you have to pay a lot of attention to. It's something that you can do on the internet and just click through pretty easily and answer a couple of questions at the end. But I do think that people in our generation generally understand the concept of consent, know what it is, and it's something that we think about and talk about. And that doesn't mean that sexual assault doesn't happen. It's still really prevalent. And I think that's because people still have differing understandings of what consent is. I think that's because of it's because of a whole host of things. I also think that a lot of people in my generation learn about sex and intimacy through porn, which does not really provide an accurate or healthy like representation of what a healthy intimate relationship should be. And I honestly think that has a lot to do with a lot of sexual assault issues that still occur. But in general, I think we do, I guess similarly to the previous generation, we do, I think, learn about consent really through the conversations with our friends, our family, a lot of books and media. But I think it is also something that we are more open to talking about in our circles and in our communities. And now in college and everything, there are a lot of student groups that are focused on things like violence, like domestic violence, sexual assault. So there's a lot more awareness. A lot more people talk about it. And I think in general, in my circles, consent is just understood as it needs to be voluntary, enthusiastic, ongoing, available, able to be revoked at any time. That's not everyone's understanding of consent, but I think that's what people are pushing for, to be understood as consent. And when the conversations are happening and in these trainings that were given and in any like organized, I think, trainings about sexual assault, that is what consent is and understood to be. So that's a big overview of, I think, my thoughts on the topic.
As a second-gen young South Asian immigrant here, what are your thoughts on how we can create this kind of an awareness in our community, right? When and where should we start? How do we start even talking about this?
Well, I think it should start young. I think it's difficult. I think it starts at home young. I think consent is something that can be brought up with kids when they're kids. Like you can allow children to like understand that they have control over their own bodies and need to respect other people's bodies, even just through things like allowing your kids to say no to being hugged by other family members if they don't want to, or ensuring that adults like ask before picking up a child, because right now those are all things that people just do and assume that like it's okay for us to touch children this way. And so I think even in those, like, even starting there, and introducing, like, like that you can say no to anything because this is your body and you're allowed to have boundaries about what happens to your body from even such a young age. I think that just gets the idea of consent understood more fully, even from a younger age. And then as children go older, that can be expanded to sex and intimacy. And also teaching children that they should, treat their friends that way too, and other adults that way too. So yeah, for me, I think it should start young. And I think it really is important for it to start at home. But that also does require just a broader, I think, understanding of what consent is. And it's a lot about sex, but it's not just about sex. It's about having boundaries about your own bodies, and that can start very young, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And that's a very valid point, because we really have to start young. But one of the things is probably many older generation people don't even know how to start this conversation, right? How to begin this conversation with their kids, because this has always been kept under wraps. Growing up, at least for me personally, and from my peers and my own this thing, the way we grew up, the way we understood about sex and anything related to this, that was like, it has to be kept under wraps. What happens in the bedroom remains there. It just doesn't come out, right? Nobody talks about it. Nobody shares anything. So I think the first step is to have open conversations. Just to finish up this, I'll get back to you, Urja, in a minute for you. So there's one question that has been asked. What do the younger generation think the first generation immigrants can do to bring more awareness?
In general, I think just talk about it more, be more open to talking. I mean, because a lot of my white friends, I feel like have a lot more and open discussions with their families and their parents about sex and their sex lives. And my immigrant friends do not have that kind of relationship with their parents, even if they do have good relationships with their parents. I think it's just, there's just different cultural kind of understandings and like willingnesses to talk about these things. So I think older generation folks who are, open and willing to talk about these things, talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your family members, and talk about it with your kids, and don't act like it's a taboo topic or something, something bad or something that needs to be hidden, because everybody does it, everybody's involved in it. And yeah, I just think being willing to be more open about it with everybody in your life, I think would go a long way.
Thank you, Sanjana. Welcome back, Urja. I hope you fixed your issue and you're able to talk to us.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. But yeah, building on what Sanjana said, I think having that open relationship with your children and being able to talk about sex and safe sex practices, and not even just safe sex practices, but also just what healthy relationships are, and also having that relationship with your parents, with your children, that if your child is in an unhealthy relationship with an intimate partner, that they can go to, being that support system for your children is very important. So if they are ever in a situation where they are, the intimate relationship is not good, and if they need to reach out to someone, they can reach out to their parents, and they know that they can, they have that support system there. I think not having an adequate support system is one of the reasons why a lot of people are very hesitant to ask for help. Because usually we want to ask for help within our intimate circles, and to people who we know. So parents are sometimes one of the main people we go to, especially if your child is still a teenager, preteen. I think it's very important to have that relationship with your child where they can come to you when they need to.
Urja, I want to go back to the question that you didn't get a chance to answer because of your audio issues. The question is about consent and physical intimacy, how it is talked about in your circle of friends and your peer groups.
I think consent, in terms of consent, I think I learned a lot about consent, what it is, how it's received, all of that. I learned it a lot through just discussing with my peers and discussing our experiences and sort of building on that and realizing, what was healthy, what wasn't healthy. I don't think we did a lot of discussions on consent in school. I think our sex education during school was very inadequate. And I definitely think that it's one of those things where I feel in the American school system, we definitely have a lot more space and a lot more openness to discuss those topics, but it's not discussed as much. So I did a lot of my information that I received was from peers. It was a lot from other individuals. And I think a lot of people within my generation, we are very well informed on what consent is, and you know how it's received, and similar to what Sanjana was saying, you know, we have that openness to discuss it as well. So if someone comes to me and tells me, hey, you know, I don't think that was very consensual, or I think, you know, regards to consent, this should be added in there, we are more open to kind of understanding that standpoint and building upon the definition of consent overall.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, and the first question is specifically for Sanjana, because she's a law student. Probably, Urja, you can also give your input since you've started working as a legal advocate, right? Is it even possible to consider bringing in a law where before issuing a marriage certificate, both parties are required to take the safety and consent class? Even though it may not mean much more than some documentation, it might make a difference because a lot of people have never heard of consent, especially in context of marriage. Sanjana, do you want to?
Honestly, I have no idea. I think at this point, everybody who goes through undergraduate in the United States takes some sort of sexual assault training. I think at a lot of jobs, they also have sexual assault training. But I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know much about family law. I don't know much about the requirements for getting married. And obviously not everybody goes to college and not everybody has like an office job where you're required to do the sorts of trainings that we're required to do now. But yeah, so my honest answer is that I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's something that can be like legalized and like forced to happen before people get legally married. But I do in the US, I do think that a pretty large majority of adults in the US have at some point taken some sort of sexual assault training course.
Okay.
What do you think, Urja? Do you have any?
The only thing that I would probably say is even if that was mandated, how likely is it that someone's going to take it seriously? You know, some people, kind of like what we were discussing with the college sexual assault training that we would do, you can just sit on the side and just click through the entire training, and really you don't have to pay attention. So if something like that was implemented, what is the likelihood that people actually do take it seriously? So I think in those terms, I think even if it is legalized, will it be beneficial in that sense that will people actually take it seriously? In terms of bringing awareness, I think it starts at your own household. You know, I firmly believe that. So I think if you have children, having conversations with your children, that's a really good way to start. I know a lot of first generation, like my mom, she goes to the temple almost every month, right? So I think in terms of that, maybe she can try engaging in conversations at these religious places to see if they can hold or host any sort of seminars or classes where you can teach parents how to communicate with your children, and you can also teach parents on what consent is, because that's one of the main things that we discussed is that consent, the information on consent wasn't really given to the first generation the way it was to the second generation. So maybe kind of having that information is a very good basis for having discussions with your children as well.
So thank you, Urja and Sanjana. You have really shared some valuable insights, which will give us some idea about how to move ahead. But another question I wanted to ask you was, there are two more things I wanted to ask, right? One question is, how do we get men involved in this conversation, right? Because that is one of the biggest struggles we seem to be having, because as you might have seen from the findings, it was less than 8% of the respondents so far have been men. So do you have any thoughts on how we can engage men in this conversation.
I mean, I think that's something that even our generation kind of struggles with. We're very, like, me and my friends are very, very open with talking about these things with each other. And my male friends are, but not, I don't think it's necessarily common. And that has a whole host of reasons for why men aren't as open to talking about these things. And I think, so I mean, I think, again, like we've kind of been saying, that starts with men themselves, like, because there are men who are willing to talk about these things and have these conversations, and it's maybe partially their responsibility to talk to other men about it and try to start bringing these other men into those conversations. Do you have any thoughts, Urja?
Yeah, so, similar to what Sanjana was saying, I think I really don't know the answer to that question. However, I do think that if men see other men engaging in this conversation, so I think how we discuss, having safe spaces for women to discuss their experiences, I think having safe spaces for men to sort of engage in these conversations, maybe that will bring a change. But again, I think also because I think a lot of it has to do with, patriarchal beliefs, and the fact that men sort of not benefit, but they're at that, they're at the highest part of that hierarchy. So it's not really something that affects them in terms of like statistics, it's not something that affects them a lot. So I feel like it's not a conversation they do have, or they are willing to engage in terms of like, compared to women. So compared to women, I don't think it's something that they are willing to engage in just because it doesn't affect them in the rates that it affects women.
Okay. We hope that you will join us and continue to support us as we continue doing the work that we are doing, ending violence in intimate relationships and within families. Do email us at maitri@maitri.org with your thoughts, your questions, and any ideas you may have of engaging with us. And please, for any information regarding Maitri, please go to our website, www.maitri.org, to learn about all the work that we do in the community. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and a special thanks to Sanjana and Urja for taking the time to be a part of this conversation with us. Thank you all, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of the day.